Spirito appears to be based specifically on a long-haired kitten or a possibly Iberian lynx kitten, which makes sense because Iberia is, well, where the Paldea region is based on. Floragato seems to be based on a cat as well, or the Iberian lynx, and the interesting thing is its flower bud and wine seem to resemble a yo-yo, which is kind of cool, but that's not all. In terms of its actual design, it could be based on Puss in Boots as well, a famous fairy tale within Europe, and also you guys have seen Puss in Boots, so you probably know what I'm referring to with that. Meowscarada may be a combination of meow and mascarada, which is Spanish and Portuguese for masquerade, which also makes sense because if you look at the face of Meowscarada, you'll notice that it's literally wearing a mask, one of those masks specifically for masquerade balls. And interestingly enough, those originated in the court culture of Burgundy in the 15th century and quickly diffused to France and the Habsburg monarchy, and then Spain following the succession issues that happened there. So a bit of a history lesson. Another interesting thing is that its signature move seems to be sort of inspired by the magic trick of specifically making flowers appear out of nowhere, which is also pretty awesome. Fuekoko's name is a combination of the word fuego, which is Spanish for fire, and cocodrillo, Spanish for crocodile, and may also come from fuecoso, which is Italian for fiery, which is interesting. Nonetheless, though, Fuekoko is more or less a baby crocodile. It does have some similarities to a theropod dinosaur and also crocodile toys, but not just that, it also seems to resemble a chili pepper in design, like a ghost pepper of sorts, which makes sense given that its actual final evolution is also partially ghost type, and yeah, it is kind of interesting. Broccolor is interesting. It's unable to learn Encore via TM, which is weird because its evolutionary friends can actually do that, which is really strange. Also, when it comes to Broccolor, it seems to resemble a crocodile with a calavera pattern. A calavera pattern is what you see on the screen right here. Now, Broccolor's overall appearance may draw inspiration from Mexican and Andalusian folk art, and the fireball on its head seems to resemble a sombrero de charro worn by mariachi players, or a sombrero de catite. Now, I just think it looks cool. What do you guys think? Then we have Skeledirge. Now, Skeledirge's name may be a combination of skeleton and dirge, which is a type of song or, well, a performance that is performed during mourning, such as funerals, which makes sense with its partial ghost typing. And also, when it comes to this ghost typing, it could be drawing inspiration for that from the Egyptian deity Sobek, which is specifically a deity related to the Nile crocodile, which is another thing that it seems to be somewhat, similar to. As for some parts of its design, the tip of the actual, snout of it, or the nose, the bulb you see, could be related to the gnorial's snouts, which enables those specific things to produce certain sounds. Overall, its design seems to be related to a lot of different things, and they all just kind of get mixed into one. Quaxley is very interesting, as it turns out that Quaxley is not even from Paldea. In his Pokédex entries from Pokemon Scarlet says this Pokemon migrated to Paldea from distant lands long ago. The gel secreted by its feathers repels water and grime. So yes, it seems to imply that specifically Quaxley isn't actually from this region. It isn't actually from Paldea, it's from somewhere else, which is kind of cool. And Quaxley also seems to be based on a young crested duck, or a South American crested duck. The crest itself resembles a beret or a turban, which is interesting, and the teal coloration on its feet and crest may be inspired by the blue-footed Bobby, which is a really funny little looking duck with blue feet. Foxwell is interesting. First of all, its name is a combination of a lot of different stuff, like quack, aqua, wax, well, and swell. Just a bunch of, different ocean waves and stuff. But that's not all. As for its design, it still looks like a duck, right? But it does have some elements of a ballet dancer in there, and also has some elements in its design that remind me of a, carnival dancer, somebody from like a Rio carnival, or of the carnival of Santa Cruz de Tenerife in the Canary Islands, which also makes sense because there is a cultural association between anatids, which is basically just ducks, it's just the scientific term for it, and carnivals, which can be seen all the way back to ancient Rome, where the crested goose was a sacred animal of the goddess Juno. So there is a massive connection between carnivals, dancers, and stuff like that, and of course, Quaxwell. Then we have Quavo. So the first thing about Quavo we should mention is that it does look like a carnival dancer. Even the dance it does in-game does look like that as well. If you actually look at it, the carnival dance that it performs could be inspired by the samba, which is a dance with African origin from present-day Angola. But it is pretty cool because it becomes the national identity of Brazil later on. It's a fighting type, and movements may also be based on capoeira, which is a fighting style that originated in Brazil. You've probably seen it before. But in its actual Pokédex entry, the relation translations to Brazil make even more sense. It is talked about it being from faraway places, which would be making sense because its visuals and the way it looks and all that does kind of resemble modern Carnival and like how it developed in the venue of Brazil itself, which is really cool. As for its name though, Quavo may also be a combination of quá, which is the Portuguese onomatopoeia for duck sounds, so quack quack, right? And also aqua and carnaval, which is also again Spanish and Portuguese for carnival. So a lot of Portuguese references and connections, which make sense as Brazil is the, well, I guess, largest country besides Portugal that speaks Portuguese. Lechonk is interesting. First of all, Lechonk is the only Pokemon that based that total of 254, but that's not all. As for its design, it seems to be based on a black Iberian pig, and it also has a description in the Pokedex which says that it's a gourmand that sniffs out only the most fragrant foods, which also may come from truffle hogs or domestic pigs that are used to locate truffles, which are very, very valuable. There is a lot to say about Oink alone, but the interesting part about it has to be its gender difference. The fact that it's the only Pokemon in Generation 9 to actually have a gender difference in its base Pokemon. As for its appearance, it does seem to look somewhat like just any one of the different pigs you can find in the Iberian Peninsula. Most likely the black Iberian pig would be the closest one. As for its shiny coloration, however, it could be a crossbreed of a black Iberian pig and a Duroc pig. Then when it comes to gender differences, and this is the big one, okay? Its signature ability is the lingering aroma, which makes sense because male pigs or male versions of pigs usually do have this pheromone, which also is found in truffles, which is why female pigs are trained as truffle hogs, because they will be able to smell that, whereas the male ones will not go after it just naturally. Oink alone's behavior may also be based on the common beauty and fashion tropes, which are often associated with the heavy use of perfumes and colognes in general. Also, when it comes to the design, it does feel like they have this lipstick on pig kind of visual play going on as well, with another thing being interesting, which is that the male Oink Alon's tail appears to be based on a traditional perfume atomizer, whereas the female Oink Alon's tail seems to be based on a perfume tassel. Tarantula is an interesting one. It seems to be based on an orb weaver spider, and as for its shiny coloration, it seems to resemble the Destiny nut from the game, which is kind of interesting. As for its name, it is a combination of tarantula and round, which you can see with its round design. Spidops is the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 404 or 404, which is kind of funny, and it also has the lowest base stat total out of any fully evolved or non-evolving Pokemon introduced in Scarlet and Violet. However, as for its name, Spidops may be a combination of Spider, Spy, and Ops, which is the abbreviated version of Operations, which is interesting. As for what it is based on, though, it seems to be based on the ogre-faced spider, which is this thing. Now, overall, Spidops also has kind of this inspiration to it from, I guess, Special Operation Forces, with its like kind of design having ballistic eyewear or night vision goggles and bulletproof vest. Kind of got that whole military thing going on with it. Now, Nimble is interesting. First of all, its name is a combination of the word nymph, which is an immature form of an insect, and the word nimble, which is just being flexible. Now, the other thing, though, about it is that it's obviously a grasshopper, but if you look at its third set of legs, those seem to fold up and resemble pocket knives, which makes sense given what it evolves into. Lowkick is the first ever bug dark-type Pokemon. Yes, the first one ever added in. As for what Lowkick is, though, it's also a grasshopper, and in particular could be a locust variety of a grasshopper. Now, when it actually comes to Lowkick itself, it appears to be based on superheroes of the Kamen Rider franchise, which all kind of have this design that kind of does look like a grasshopper, which is interesting because the whole design looks like that. And it was actually even leaked before release that it was going to be a Pokemon based on a Kamen Rider character. Now, Lowkick, as for its name, is a combination of locust and kicks or crickets, or a pun on low kicks, right? Like doing low kicks with its legs, which makes sense given that this thing definitely is doing some crazy stuff with its legs and arms. Now, Palmy is interesting. It appears to be based on a rodent. I mean, it is a Pika clone at the end of the day, but as for what specifically could be based on, it is an alpine marmot, which can be found in the Pyrenees mountain ranges bordering Spain and France. As for its name origin, though, it is a combination of paw, palm, and mini or nezumi, which is Japanese for mouse. So both Palmo and Palmot are based on a marmot, such as the alpine marmot in this case. Now, the thing about them is that they both have the ability ability to discharge electricity from their paws, which could be inspired by defibrillators, which are used to resuscitate people whose hearts have stopped. And this all just makes sense, as that's why they have the ability to learn Revival Blessing, a move that literally revives Pokemon back to life, which is kind of crazy. As for the name though, it's just a combination of Pawmi and Marmot and just those together, or the word paw again, which is coming from their hands or their paws, being used to literally, you know, resuscitate other Pokemon, which is kind of crazy. Then we have Tandemous, which is a cool Pokemon. First of all, Tandemous is the only Pokemon that can skip the evolution animation sequence when evolving, which is interesting. And also, the thing about Tandemous is that it is a combination of the words tandem and mouse. Now, tandem is just two people doing something at the same time, doing something in tandem. As for the mouse part, well, it literally is just the German version of the word mouse, right? And as for its design, it does have kind of an appearance resembling that of a dollhouse figurine, such as, for example, the Japanese doll line Sylvanian families. So kind of a bit of connection right there. Then we have Mousehold, which is an interesting one. So it's a family of mice, which is pretty evident. The actual name is a combination again of the German word for mouse as well as the word household, which is logical. It's a household of little mice. However, the really cool thing is that they are kind of plastic doll figurine looking in terms of design, which we mentioned earlier about the pre-evolution. But again, another interesting thing is that the forms that are here can kind of be based on the nuclear family, given the whole doll-like appearance. If you think about the nuclear family, think of like Indiana Jones or Nuketown in Call of Duty. Next up is Fido. Now, Fido is an interesting one, as it is mostly just a puppy. It does bear some resemblance to the Dashbun breed of dogs, but also the fact that it looks like a pastry. Specifically, it does look at like a dessert, or part of it looks like a dessert that's called ensaimada, a type of Spanish pastry shaped like a spiral. Now, as for Fido itself, the name Fido is specifically mixing Fido, like the stereotypical name for a pet dog, and dough, which is logical because it's basically a pastry dog. Dashbun is an interesting one because its name literally is a reference to the Dachshund, which is literally a breed of dogs. But on top of that, its actual design is just kind of a mixture of different baked goods, such as bread loaves, bread rolls, buns, just a bunch of different mixed together breads, kind of to make this one singular dog, which is really weird, man. It's really, really, really strange. Now, its darker colors compared to its pre-evolution is actually pretty interesting because that would make sense given that it's now a baked dog, right? It's like a baked bun rather than what it was in Fido. As for its name though, it's literally just Dachshund and Bun, so Dashbun, which is logical in terms of naming. Did you guys know that Smoliv, I mean, besides its name being just literally a small olive, it's just goofy and funny, its shiny coloration is actually based on a black olive, whereas its regular version is based on a green olive. Next up though is Dolly, which is the evolution of Smoliv, and this one again is pretty interesting. It's same thing here. Its shiny version is specifically resembling black olives, whereas its regular version is green olives. And as for its name, it's a mixture of a doll and olive, so Dolliv, and it's just kind of a straightforward name. As for our Bolivar, it's pretty much the same thing here. In terms of its naming though, it has arbor in its name, which could be arbor, specifically for tree in Spanish. As for olive, it's just a regular way of saying olive, and also possibly diva in the name could be there, because it is a bit more feminine and, you know, kind of controlling type of design, I guess, if you want to say it like that. Either way though, as for this one as well, it does have the black olives in its shiny coloration, same way that its regular version has the green ones, or green olives, and it does also seem kind of in a bit of a similar pose, resembling that of an olive wreath in battle. Its calm temper may be inspired by the symbolism of the olive branch, which is, you know, a traditional way of showing peace, right? Or towards peace. So yeah, it could be that. Squawkabilly is an interesting one. It's the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 417, and another thing about it is that it is mostly just based probably on a parakeet or a parrot. As for its name though, it's a mixture of squawk and bill, for beak I guess, and rockabilly, which is another word. So it's just a mixture of those three words in this case. As for its actual appearance and design, it does have a bit of a kind of delinquent style going on for it, right? With like the way its hair is designed, looking similar to how you would expect, like, I guess, sort of street gangs or thugs in a lot of Japanese type of culture, or maybe more of that kind of punk artist type of design is seemingly what's going on right here. So now that we're talking about knackly, as well as evolutions, Knackle Stack, as well as Gargonicle, we have a few things to say. First of all, knackly is based on a rock salt crystal, which is pretty interesting. Now, the actual design of it as well does have a mushroom shape, kind of a mushroom shape of design to it, which is a reference to the mushroom rocks, which are a naturally occurring rock formation that does exist. But that's not all. The scraping of its body along the ground when it like leaves these little salt trails could be a literal interpretation, or I guess a literal reference to salt roads, literal trade routes upon which salt was transported to foreign markets, as well as its eyes, which are glowing, which could be based on the Himalayan salt lamps. As for its name, though, which is the interesting one, which kind of goes across all of them, which is that it's a combination of NiCl, which is basically sodium chloride, or table salt for short. As for the other part of its name, it's the word little, and the I at the end of its name could also be a reference to iodine, a common element added to salt to prevent iodine deficiency. But that's not all. The evolutions, knackle stack, for example, in this case, is just a combination of, again, the sodium chloride, aka table salt, and the word stack, possibly a reference to dry stack, which is a method of stone structure building that doesn't use mortar, which, fair enough. Nonetheless, though, as for its design, it does have this kind of voxel design going on with it, and its glowing eyes are similar to the Himalayan salt lamp reference we talked about earlier. But then we have, of course, the final one, which is going to be Gargonical. So for this one, well, same thing. It's based on rock salts and also possibly sedimentary layers of bedrock, and the same thing goes with the pre-evolution in this case. But as for the actual design of it, Gargonical is actually being able to heal injured Pokemon with salt, which may be a play on both the term salt curing, or the word cure, meaning to restore health, as well as to preserve food, and the idiom to rub salt in the wound, meaning to make worse the injury of any sort of ailment, injury, whatever you want to call it, right? Now, Gargonicle's actual name is possibly gargantuan, the word for something that is just massive, and, again, sodium chloride. It also may be borrowing from tabarnacle, which is another thing. But in this case, I do think it's probably gargantuan and the sodium chloride mixed together into one. Cadet is next, and it has a name which is a combination of char, which is to burn, charcoal, and cadet. If you don't know what a cadet is, well, you can actually see it in the design of it. Cadet is based most likely on, as far as we can tell, some kind of little mini soldier, which makes sense because a cadet or a squire is usually a boy in training, usually training to be a knight of some sort. And in this case, you can see exactly that with Cadets. Next up is Amarok, which, first of all, for its name, we have a combination of multiple things. The first one is arma, which is specifically in Spanish and Portuguese for weapon. Armadura is also Spanish and Portuguese for armor, and rouge, or I guess rogue, whatever you want to call it, is French for red, which matches with its colors. As for what it's based on, it seems to be a possessed suit of armor. Its design may also be based on like just medieval heroic tales of European knights and just generally like chivalry and stuff like that. And as well, its actual ability to put its like arms together is actually really interesting because it's reminiscent to the depiction of arm cannons in some media, which is fair enough. We've seen some stuff like that in, for example, like, I guess, Mega Man? It's just an example, is where you can see that kind of thing. Ceruledge is the other evolution that you can get, and this one is interesting. It's a combination of cerulean, which is a shade of dark blue, and edge, which could be the edge of a blade because it does have literally blade arms for the most part. So that could be where the name kind of gets its inspiration from. But also, in terms of what it is, it's also based on a suit of armor, which makes sense. But also, it could potentially be based on an Akuma, a Japanese fire spirit often depicted carrying a sword. It may also get some inspiration from the Jinn, which is a humanoid fire spirit of Arabic mythology, which also relates to the previous one we talked about, which was Amarok, who has the arm cannons, which is also another thing that the Jinn can have as well. Tadbulb is an interesting Pokemon. As for what it's based on in terms of design, it seems to be a tadpole and a light bulb, which makes sense with the eventual electric typing and all that. Now, Tadbulb, in terms of its name, seems to be mixing a tadpole and a light bulb in the name as well, as you can see. However, then there is Bellibolt, the evolution. First of all, the name is pretty evident. It's Belly and Bolt, which makes sense, given that it is the electric typing on it. But then there's some other stuff. For example, there is some interesting connection between frogs and electricity that can be seen in Bellibolt's design, which may be specifically inspired by experiments in researching Galvalianism, which used frog legs specifically to do the experiments. Belly bots, as well as like the belly button on it, being inspired possibly by a plasma globe, the way it looks. Wattrel is another one. So Wattrel may be a combination of the words what and petrol together into one. As for what it's based on, it could be based on a storm petrel, which is a bird, and its design may also be based on either a myth of storm petrels indicating bad weather at sea, or a play on the words storm petrel as a whole. Kilowattrel is the evolution, and this one is a combination of kilowatt, which is a way of measuring or a specific measurement of electricity, and then petrol, which of course is the bird that we talked about previously, so it pretty much confirms what it's based on in that case. But this one also could be based on a frigate bird. Like a frigate bird, Kilowattrel has a hooked beak, angular wings, and a forked tail. Mastiff is the next one. Mastiff is a combination of Mastiff and Mischief, and Mastiff in itself could be based on a puppy of the Mastiff breed of dog specifically. And then there is the evolution Mabustiff, which is a mixture of Mafia, Mob Boss, as well as Mastiff. So it's just a combination of all of those. As for its appearance, it seems to be combined with its name, which is like, you know, having the dark typing and protective nature towards its family, maybe derived from the archetypical look and behavior of leaders in organized crime families, like a mafia boss basically, like an Italian mafia boss or a Yakuza boss of sorts.